Well, thank you for coming. And you may be wondering why I'm dressed like this, and it's because I'm taking you on a journey across space and time to uncover the origins of biodiversity. So if you think about Alaska, probably one of the first things that comes to mind is giant grizzly bears, right? And if you think of Australia, probably you're thinking of kangaroos. So biodiversity is one of the most notable aspects of our planet. So it's natural to ask, why do animals look the way they do? Like, why does this chameleon have those weird googly eyes and the horns? Or why do animals live where they do? Why are koalas only found in Australia, while African elephants are only found in Africa? You may also be wondering why some groups are more diverse than others. For example, we only have a handful of great apes, including us, but there's thousands and thousands of beetles. So to answer these questions, I looked into the evolution of this group, the monitor lizards, which includes the Komodo dragons and around 80 other species. So monitors can look different ways. There are some species that are thin, have long limbs and long tails. There are some species that are really fat. They have short limbs and short legs. But perhaps the most striking variation is in body size. This is the smallest species, which can fit in my hand. And this is the largest species, the Komodo dragon, which is around 3 meters long. So to characterize this variation, I visit several museums across the world. This is the National Natural History Museum in France, and I measured hundreds and hundreds of lizards, some of them very smelly. And while physical features can tell you a lot about the evolutionary history of a group, DNA remains an essential tool that can provide a more detailed picture. And in the same way that you can use genetic data to reconstruct the relationships between individuals and build a family tree, you can use genetic data to reconstruct the relationships between the species. So why do monitor lizards look the way they do? A lot of it has to do with the relationships. I look similar to my brother because we are very closely related. In the same way, species that are closely related to each other look alike. But there is some variation that is independent of how these species are related to each other. And it has to do with how these lizards are using their habitats. Some species are semi-aquatic. There are other species that climb trees, others that spend their time underground. There are some species that live in rocky escarpments. Some species are terrestrial, and others live in tree trunks. So here we are looking at variation in body size, and we can see that it is related to habitat use. The smallest species are those that live under the ground, and the terrestrial species are pretty large. This is a plot summarizing variation in body shape in these lizards. Each point represents a species, and the closer the points are, the more similar the species are. We can see that the species that climb trees regularly have very long and narrow tails, which they use to balance themselves up in the trees. And the species that spend their time underground have short and thick tails. In the same way, species that are terrestrial or semi-aquatic have deep heads, and the species that live in rocky escarpments have flat heads because they hide in rock crevices. But why use the habitat in different ways in the first place? It has to do with competition. Imagine you're arriving in a new neighborhood and you want to open up several restaurants. You wouldn't open up like 10 Mexican restaurants, right? It would be better to have a Mexican restaurant, an Indian place, a Korean place. That way they're not competing with each other. In the same way, monitor lizards are using their habitat in different ways to avoid competing for the same resources. Another kind of interaction between the species, other than competition, is hybridization. A very well-known case is between horses and donkeys. When they hybridize with each other, they create a meal. We found genetic evidence for hybridization between the Komodo dragon and a group of monitors called the sand monitors. This is another plot summarizing variation in the physical features of these animals. This is the Komodo dragon. Those are the closest relatives of the sand monitors. And these are the sand monitors, which, as you can see, are intermediate between both of these. So we can see that hybridization had an effect on how these animals look. And why do monitors live where they do? Well, based on plate tectonics and the relationships between the species, we were able to build a model that told us that monitor lizards originated in Africa. From there, they immigrated to the Middle East and Southern Asia, the Philippines, New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and Australia. We also decided to take a closer look at the monitors living in Australia and New Guinea. these places have been separated for long enough to develop their own unique species of monitor. However, we know that throughout history, New Guinea and Australia have been connected several times. So why aren't there more monitors from New Guinea in Australia and the other way around? Again, it has to do with competition. Imagine you're arriving in a new neighborhood and you want to open up a Mexican restaurant, but there's already a really good Mexican restaurant in town. You would probably go out of business. In the same way, if you are a climbing monitor from New Guinea and you arrive in Australia, but there's already a climbing monitor there, you're probably not going to do very well and you're going to go extinct. And remember our little hybridization story? Well, if the Komodo dragon lives here in the Lesser Sunda Islands of Indonesia, and the sun monitors live here in Australia, then how did hybridization happen? Based on the relationships between the species, we were able to reconstruct the ancestral ranges of these monitors, and we actually found that a few million years ago, they lived together in northern Australia. Based on the environmental preferences of the Komodo dragon and reconstructions of past climate, we were able to see where the suitable habitat of this lizard was in the past, here in red. And we can see that suitable habitat was found across northern Australia. But in the present, the suitable habitat becomes restricted to the Lesser Sunda Islands in Indonesia. And that's why the Komodo dragon only lives there presently. And why are some groups of monitors more diverse than others? We can look across regions, and there are places like Africa and mainland Asia that have only a few monitors. But there are other places like the Philippines, Australia, and New Guinea that are crawling with monitors. So we decided to take a closer look at this. Well, the Philippines and New Guinea are islands, right? And each of these islands has a different group of monitors. The monitors on each of these islands cannot reproduce with the monitors living in the other islands. So over time, they accumulate differences and become different species. But Australia is not a group of islands, it's a continent. So how did diversification happen here? It has to do with the environment. Australia has very different kinds of environments. There's deserts, there's rainforests, there's mountains, there's grasslands. And monitor lizards adapted to each of these different kinds of habitats and over time became different species. It also has to do with the lack of competition. In other places like Africa and mainland Asia, there are mammalian carnivores, such as these mongoose, that are competing with monitors, but they are not found in Australia. So with this lack of competition, Australian monitors could diversify into many different species, each of them interacting with their environments in different ways. So it seems like habitat use, interactions between the species, such as competition and hybridization, and past environmental change, such as tectonics and climate change, all acted together to shape the diversity of this amazing group of lizards. Thank you.